getting directly involved in resistance, physically or otherwise, is smart, because it's probably not in your best interest at the moment. But Rand Paul's lawsuit is incredibly important because it marks the first time that there is a good chance that these programs could be legally repealed to where they ought to be. Now, it'll take a few years, of course, and it'll probably make it up to the Supreme Court, but I think it's important because, as Rand Paul said today on CNN, so far, 15 judges found the NSA spying in secret to be legal, and the only arguments heard were presented by the government. There was nobody standing up for the American people in the legal arguments for this. Now, many people will say, how can you pass something like this or hold it as legal without having an opposing argument in a courtroom? I mean, you can't be found guilty without being allowed to provide a defense. And that's basically what the government has done. The government has given itself a permission slip. It's no different than Eric Holder investigating himself for crimes he committed. That's stupid. Now, if you went to public school, you know exactly what it's like when students grade their own papers. They'll mark answers correct that aren't correct. They'll cheat and give themselves a better grade. And that's exactly what the government's doing. They're grading their own paper. They're stacking the deck. And that's absolute nonsense. This NSA nonsense is a complete violation of the Fourth Amendment. Unreasonable searches and seizures. I don't know about you, but if say the FBI came in, opened my mailbox, and started sifting through it, opening everything and reading it, and then handing it back to me saying, we're just making sure that you're not a terrorist, there's no way that any judge would hold that to be constitutional. It's an unreasonable search and seizure. I am entitled to the privacy of my paper and my property. Cops can't just walk into my place and search it for no reason. It's like a dorm check at a military barracks where they come in and they see if you've got any contraband. And that you would never tolerate that, and nobody would. Now, a soldier has to tolerate it because they signed their life over to Uncle Sam. But, a regular citizen from any country, for that matter, is entitled to their privacy. Our Constitution is all people. It's a natural right to your property being yours. And it's just like the other argument. It's just like gay marriage. You either are entitled and own your own life or you don't. Government says you don't own your own life, therefore you don't own your own property. Therefore, they're allowed to sift through it at any time or place. They can sift through it and look through it and decide, what they want to keep and what they don't, and what information is yours and what isn't. And it's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely crazy. And it's about time somebody in Washington really stood up to the administration on this. And I'm glad that Senator Rand Paul is doing it. And I think that any politician that claims to stand up for your rights has to be on board with this lawsuit. They have to be against the NSA spying. I cannot fathom how Peter King in New York keeps getting elected when it's so very, very clear that he doesn't stand up for the rights of the people he represents. I would never in a million years vote for somebody that doesn't represent my rights. Somebody who wants to strip my rights away from me. And that's effectively what the government's doing. They are stripping away your Fourth Amendment rights, gutting the Constitution because they can, because people are not standing up to them. It was probably one of the most horrible experiences to see the headlines about Edward Snowden releasing the NSA information and having people say, well, we figured they were spying on us anyway, or you can't really be surprised they're doing this. They've been doing it for years. And it's like people justify NSA spying because, oh, well, I figured they were doing it, or it's just a fact of life. And that's crazy. That logic does not stand up to evaluation. Thinking that way does not pass any of the logical tests unless you honestly believe you don't own your own life. Now, because it's a hard battle, does not make it any less of a battle that needs to be fought. And I think it's something that you should bring up with anybody that you talk to. Do they or do they not own their own life? Well, if they do they own their own property? Do they own their house? If they answer yes, or if they, if they own their phone that they paid for, if they own it, then what right does government have to sift through it whenever they want? Now, a lot of people will say that government has a right to keep its people safe, and that's the reason. That's the justification for this. By that same logic, government has the right to kick down your door, kill your dog, and check through the house for any possible crimes committed. That's not legal. No person would accept that. Why is it different when it's your phone? The correct answer is that it isn't different. And that's why this lawsuit is important. It's incredibly important. And if you haven't signed up for it, you need to. Google it. I'll try and post a link to the lawsuit on my Facebook page, facebook.com/AmericaOurWay. And you can sign up for it. Now, Rand Paul is also making headlines. There's something else he's got going on. Because he is already campaigning against Hillary Clinton. And he's been going after her hard. And the big thing that he's making a point about is the Democrats' war on women. He has been coming out and saying that Bill Clinton is a sexual predator because of the way he treated women in the workplace, the interns, Monica Lewinsky. And a lot of, Democrats are saying, oh, well, that's ancient history and, that's not relevant and how dare you and et cetera, et cetera. Now, you can argue that Monica Lewinsky was, a legal adult at the time, and she's perfectly entitled to do whatever she wants to do, but this woman's life was ruined because the president came on to her, or she came on to him. Now, I don't feel much sympathy for her, but it is very noteworthy that the president of the United States lied to the people, lied to the American people under oath, and that he was making his rounds in the White House, picking up interns. Now, I'm sure so many politicians do this, and quite frankly, I don't care what they do in their personal lives. I mean, have you seen Hillary? Ugh. But the point is, it raises questions about this war on women. One of the big things that Bill Clinton was famous for was saying, to women, I feel your pain. And he got a lot of the women's votes that way by trying to say he had empathy for them and all the women's hardships. But if it was a Republican that did this, and there's been a few that have had sex scandals, the media goes after them like bloodhounds, and they tear him to shreds. Whereas with Clinton, they all seem to have forgotten his sex scandal, and more importantly, how Bill treated Hillary in the whole thing. Expecting her to stand beside him and all this other stuff, and then Bill's going around and campaigning for Hillary, and that was Rand's justification, saying that, he's trying to raise money in Kentucky for Democrats. He's going around and trying to raise money for Democrats when they've got this whole platform that's a war on women. Now, why would you want an adulterer a man who cheated on his wife, arguably multiple times with multiple interns or multiple women. Why would you want that person being a spokesperson for the party that is supposed to support women? It's completely hypocritical, and Rand Paul is exactly right for going after her for it. And more importantly, Hillary Clinton is a titan to go after in terms of who's running for president. The Republicans in the primary are going to tear each other apart where they can, but they need to start going after Hillary now. She is the Goliath to their David in this election. I mean, so many people are going to vote for her just because she's a woman. And so many people are going to vote for her just because her name's Clinton. And they're going to forget about Benghazi. They're going to forget about, Bill Clinton being back in the White House. They're going to forget about Whitewatergate. They're going to forget about the election fund, campaign fund fraud that was thrown out despite having good evidence. It was thrown out by a Clinton appointee. This woman, Hillary Clinton, is one of the least ethical people in politics, and people are clamoring for her to run for president. She was guilty of multi-million-dollar campaign fraud. She took money from the Chinese. It was never proven, but there is substantial evidence pointing to that. And she had the campaign finance thing thrown out by a judge that Bill Clinton appointed to his seat. Now tell me, why do we want lying, cheating, known corrupt people in the White House? That should terrify you. It terrifies me. People complain about Obama. Look, Obama's here to stay. He's going to stay in office, period. I mean, in the off chance that Republicans get a supermajority in the Senate, they might be able to impeach him on the way he's implementing the Obamacare law, but that won't be popular with the people, and if anything, it'll rile up Democrats to the point to where Republicans could lose whatever majorities they gain in the House and Senate, and let alone the presidency in 2016. It's not smart politically, and quite frankly, Obamacare needs to be repealed. So the idea that they're complaining about how it's being implemented, the whole law is corrupt. I don't care what the Supreme Court did to justify it staying in place. The law was wrong. And if Hillary Clinton is allowed to win the presidency, or the Republicans squander a majority they might win because they're busy fighting an impeachment battle, it will hurt the country in the long run. Now, if Republicans do manage to get a majority in both houses, they can block the president from doing anything to hurt the country. They can do that. Checks and balances. But in the meantime, it is incredibly important that the fight against Hillary begin. And I can't wait to see what happens with this lawsuit. I think it's going to go big places, and I think it's going to be great political theater, and I think that it's probably one of the closest things to getting our rights restored in terms of the NSA. So Rand Paul, two big stories in the news this week. I want to talk about one more thing before we go tonight. The Obama administration is saying that another 1.1 million Americans signed up for health insurance through January in Obamacare. They released the data today, and it says that the number of people are enrolling isn't the only increase that's going on. So far, Jay Carney said today that Obamacare has passed the 3 million mark, and they think that it'll be above 3 million when the figures for February are announced. And they think that there's a